Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for Tech and Tell. I'm Anne Marie Molinari Sanders, and I'm going to be your host today. And I have our Director of Professional Development at TCall, Beth Ponder, joining me. And I'm so excited to have Beth with us today. And our topic today is News and Levels, Differentiating Instruction. And we have Dr. Katie Welch back for another webinar on News and Levels. And I want to welcome our presenter today, Dr. Katie Welch. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over and she's going to share a little bit more about herself. Welcome so much, Katie. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to be back at a Tech and Tell talking again about News and Levels. This time looking specifically about how we differentiate instruction. I want to tell you just a little bit about me so you know my background. My educational background is that I have a PhD in linguistics, and so I love languages, love language acquisition, but also just love thinking about how do you teach language to others. And so that's part of what we'll be doing today. Professionally, I work as a university instructor at UT Arlington, but also I do a lot of teacher training. In fact, the topic I'm talking about today, differentiation, I have literally gone around the world working with teachers on. And so I'm really excited to be able to share with you today on this specific topic. But also, I am a volunteer in my local community. I have a community-based ESL and GED program near my house that I volunteer in every week. And also I'm involved in faith-based programs through Literacy Connexus and just enjoy being out in the community, helping others, as you all do. Okay, so last time I was here, I introduced a resource called News and Levels. And that's what I'm talking about today, but you may not have been able to attend the previous webinar. It will ultimately be uploaded to the PD portal, but I don't want you to feel like as I'm talking that you don't know what this resource is. And so I thought we'll play a little game. And so for those that were here last time, it will be a review. And for those who are new to News and Levels, I've put a lot of hints so that you can be successful with this Kahoot as well. And it will kind of just teach us the basics about what is this resource. So then we can talk later about how do you teach with it. So the first question, I'm just wanting to know if you were here last time, basically. So true or false, I attended the previous News and Levels Tech and Tell session. So were you here last time with me or not? So 2 people were here and 13 weren't. All right, our next question is also true or false. The question is, News and Levels only focuses on US-based news stories. And I encourage you to look right up here. This is what the beginning of News and Levels, if you went to the website, it says World News for Students of English. So is it true that it only focuses on US-based news stories? That's right, you got it. Yeah, it's actually global news. Yeah, it's world news. And so when you go into the News and Levels website, you will see that there are news stories from all over the globe and not just representative of things happening in the US. Okay, next question is News and Levels is updated daily with news of current events. And so notice you've got one February 22nd, February 21st, February 21st, updated daily. Yeah, it's true. Almost every day, and sometimes twice a day, News and Levels is going to have a relevant, timely news story of something that's happening in real time around the world. Next one. Each news article is presented in 10 different reading levels. 10 different reading levels. What do you see here? I see level 1, 2, and 3, but I don't see any more. All right. And so, yeah, every news article is presented in 3 levels. There's a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3, which roughly corresponds to beginning, intermediate, and advanced. And so for whatever the news is about for that day, we were just reading before we started the webinar about the earthquake that happened earlier in the week in the East Coast. And so students could read about that either at the beginning level, intermediate, or advanced level. Students can read the article at their level and also listen to the accompanying audio too. They can read it in their level and also listen to the audio. That's true. Yeah, for every article and every level of every article, there's a sound cloud that's going to accompany it. So that was true. Difficult vocabulary terms from the article are bolded and defined. They're bolded in blue and defined. So you see. All right, that's it. Yep, you're right. Every vocabulary term, all of the difficult things, usually it's about 3, are going to be bolded and defined for the students to make sure that they are aware of vocabulary that would be beyond their current level. But I'm going to hop back now into our PowerPoint and review what we just talked about, which is what is News in Levels. So News in Levels is both a website and an app that delivers the daily news in multiple levels. The website and app are both free, and I encourage you to, if you haven't looked at that resource yet, now would be a great time just to pull it up in another tab, just to take a look around as you can see some of the features that it has. Some of the ones that I mentioned in the Kahoot were, first of all, as I just said, it's free, which we always like. You'll notice right away there's a lot of ads that pop up because it's free, but it's nice that we're not having to pay for it. It's world news, not just US based. And so even in my example here, you'll see down at the bottom, there's news from Kenya. This one about insects, it was somewhere in Africa, I believe, Abu Dhabi. So lots of news that would be relevant to English learners who are, are international from around the world. It's updated daily. It's adapted from authentic news stories. And so this is not just a team of editors who think, oh, what should we write about today? They're taking actual reporting that has been done, and it's usually starting from a video. So I was looking at one earlier that was the BBC had put out a video about the earthquake in New York and New Jersey earlier this week. And then they take that video reporting and they create 3 different articles in 3 different levels about it. So that's in essence what this is. But our topic for today is not really to talk about what is News in Levels, but how do you teach with it? If this resource is available, what do you do with it to ultimately differentiate instruction for your students? And so our objectives for today are going to be twofold. First of all, I can define differentiation, and then I can identify at least 2 ways that News in Levels can be used to differentiate instruction in a multi-level classroom. So that's where we're headed. And I just want to make sure we're all aware of what differentiation is, so we can talk about that. I'm using a quote from Carol Ann Tomlinson, who is a university professor at the University of Virginia. And she really is the one who wrote the seminal she wrote the book, literally multiple books on differentiation. Her work was largely geared towards K-12 education, but the principle itself can be applied to lots of educational contexts, including adult ed. And so what she says is that differentiation is simply a teacher attending to the learning needs of a particular student or small groups of students, rather than teaching a class as though all individuals in it were basically alike. So the opposite of differentiation is one-size-fits-all teaching, where you do one thing and you hope that you're going to reach all of the students in your room. And what we know is that we can't teach that way if we're really going to reach students. We have to attend to their specific needs or needs of a small group who have similar characteristics. So I'm curious, for those of you who are in a classroom or are supporting teachers who are in a classroom, more than likely you have noticed in your classrooms that your students are not all alike, that certainly there's diversity in lots of ways, including what countries they're from, languages they speak, etc., ages, but also in terms of ability level. Or sometimes it's not, even if you're teaching like a level 2 English class, and supposedly everyone in there is level 2, you still notice that not everyone has the same ability level. And so I'm curious, what have you noticed or observed in your own classrooms about the ways that you have mixed ability or multi-level contexts? Students are strong in different areas. Some are better at speaking and listening, others at reading and writing. Absolutely. Sometimes you have students that are really strong in oracy, but are struggling still in literacy. And sometimes you get the exact opposite, where they're really strong in literacy, but that speaking piece and listening has not quite come along. Yeah, definitely. Julie said different abilities and different skills. That's absolutely right. Sometimes you get a class where you get both beginners and advanced in the same class. Sometimes we don't have the personnel, we don't have enough teachers to be able to put one teacher per level. And so we end up combining levels together. Absolutely. HSC students who struggle in math but not language arts and vice versa. Yeah, everyone has kind of their own strengths. They come from different backgrounds. Their prior knowledge is not the same. Absolutely. Helva said some of her students come with a degree from another country, and you could have in the same classroom a student who maybe only completed through 5th grade and doesn't have a strong foundation of literacy in their native language and are now going to learn literacy in English. Well, as we talk about that challenge today, I want to use a metaphor of differentiation as a mountain. We talk about what does differentiated instruction learning look like? What does differentiated instruction look like? That is, sometimes there's a misconception that we are going to change our expectations of our students. We say, well, they can't do this, and so therefore I'm not going to expect them to. But when we think about differentiated learning, all of us in our classroom are climbing a mountain. The students are all trying to get to the top of that mountain. And so the expectation is not that some people are just going to stop halfway. The expectation is everyone's going to get to the top. We are all going there together. But how we get there, the support we need to get there, how long it takes us to get there may look very different depending on the student. But I'm not changing my ultimate goal or my learning objectives for the students. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing. We just may not do it in the same way. And so if you think about climbing a mountain, I am from Texas, so don't have a lot of experience climbing mountains. And so when I travel, go to Colorado and try to go hiking, I don't do very well. Oh, I remember going hiking with my sister-in-law in Arizona one time. Ooh, I struggled. That was hard for me. And so she hikes every day, every weekend. That's her hobby. And so we needed a little bit different supports to be able to go on that hike together and get to the destination. And you'll notice in this picture, we've got 4 people that have reached the summit. They've reached the top, but they didn't all necessarily need the same supports to get there. What do you notice is different about some of these people in terms of what they needed to get to the top? One suggestion was that one of the students has a walking stick. Absolutely. If I were to kind of go mountain climbing, I would definitely need something to stabilize myself as I was walking. But some of the other people didn't need that for sure. Yeah, in terms of who was carrying the backpacks, it looks like the older ones were carrying a little bit of heavier load than those younger ones. Some people have water. It looks like the little boy may not have been carrying his own water. There's definitely an age difference there for sure, which might lead to having different needs. How about the shoes? What do you notice about those shoes? I'm noticing that some people went kind of more tennis shoe route, and some people went more hiking boot, ankle support. And so everyone's going to the top of the mountain together, but not everyone's going to look exactly the same. Some people are going to need different things. There's such thing as canned oxygen. You can like take a can of oxygen with you when you go mountain climbing. And I think I would want one of those in my backpack. But someone who does it regularly probably wouldn't need that. And that's how it is with our students. They're all going to have different needs. And so the way they get up that mountain will need to look different. And so what I like about News and Levels is that there are scaffolds built in. There are supports built in to help students be able to achieve the learning goal. The goal is to be able to read a news article. Ultimately, that's what we're hoping our students can do. But in order to be able to do that, one kind of obvious built-in scaffold is that it's multi-level. And so they can read at the level where they currently are. Or they can start at a level 1 and then understand what it says, get the basic content down. This is about eating insects, what this article is about. And then they can challenge themselves by going up to that next level because they've already read kind of the more basic version. And we talked about last time, the beginning version is all present tense verbs and simple vocabulary. The level 2 is going to start using past tense verbs. And the level 3 is really going to be very close to what an actual news article out in the real world would look like. And so to get them to the point that they can read that level 3, they can start with level 1 and then move up, or you can have them all reading at their own level. Another built-in scaffold is that it's multimodal. And so for some students, they really need to hear the story as they're reading it. That's a scaffold, that's a support that allows them to be able to read. They may not on their own be able to figure out all of those words on the page, but if they can hear it while they're seeing it, then it helps get them to the point that they can read. And so that auditory multimodal scaffold is there. There's also visual scaffolding that's there. Every article has in the level 3, when you go click on level 3, you can scroll down and you can find the original video where this was based off of. And of course, the video is going to have lots of great images, pictures, etc., so that students can see what the article is about before they go and read it. And so that's another way to help the students kind of to activate their schema, to build on their background knowledge before they go to read the text. And so there's some built-in scaffolds in News and Levels that help the students to get to the point where they can read an article independently. So often someone mentioned that, sometimes you have students that they're really strong in oracy. They're strong in speaking and listening, particularly our students who have limited or interrupted formal education in their home country. They may come in really, literacy is hard. And so the idea of reading an article, very challenging, but you can build on their strength. Their strength is in speaking and listening. And so by adding in that auditory piece, that SoundCloud recording, it is enabling them to accomplish the task of reading. Another great thing about being multimodal is it also just takes into account our students who have disabilities. Anytime we have multimodal, we're also attending to those students who have those needs as well. Okay, I'm just about done with this part, but the last thing I wanted to mention here was in the app itself, if you have a student who, even with the SoundCloud recording and listening to it in English and reading along, even then they're still not able to understand what it means. There is the option in the app to translate the entire article into native language. And so that's kind of the canned oxygen approach. The other scaffolds won't work. That's an option, is they could read it first in their native language and then they could read it in English. But that's only there in the app. It's not on the website. Another thing that I just want to mention is in a differentiated classroom, sometimes we have those who may need the translation because they're really, really not there in their literacy yet with English. But we also may have some that are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're reading level 3 and are ready to launch into our ABE classes. You may be working on an assignment with News and Levels and they've already read it. They know exactly what it says. And now they have nothing to do, while you've got another student who's on the slower path, who's needing to first read it in their native language, then listen to it in English, then watch the video, then read it. Those are two different ways up the mountain, but one moves a lot quicker than the other. And so for those early finishers, those people who they're kind of ready to launch, what's nice about News and Levels is that there's a search button and students can look for articles that are of interest to them. So if you've done something together as a class where you've read an article, you can then empower your students to scroll down, find that search button, and they can go look for topics that they like, and it can give them some additional practice in reading informational articles. I looked for buses here, and here I found an article about why school buses are yellow. And so our early finishers can utilize that search tool to independently read and give them more practice, while some of our other learners in the class maybe are still finishing the original article that everyone was reading together. Okay, so I've said a lot there, and so I want to pause and give an opportunity for questions. Are the articles printable? That's such a great question. So let me switch over to news and levels so you can kind of see what it looks like in real time here. So I'm going to hit the home button, the globe up here, and this gets me back to the main page. And so this is today's article. It says 12/4, but that's because globally, a lot of times they put the day first and then the month. And so 12/4 is really April the 12th, which is today. Slovakia has a new president. And then here's Russia floods, also April the 12th, yesterday, etc. Oh, I'm sorry that keeps happening. So let's click into an article. I'll just go to that Slovakia has a new president. And so when I go there, there's not a print button that I see. So I don't see immediately how I could do that. But I do see, where I could right click and click print. So ultimately, I think you can print them out, but there's not an easy, ready-made ability to just print. You'll have to use your own computer settings to do so.
Katie, while you're on the website, there was another question in the chat pod from Lorraine. Do you suggest some type of whole group activity after the students have read the article at an appropriate level?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Lorraine. And that's actually where I'm headed next, is to talk about what does that look like. But the quick answer is yes, definitely. And I'll show you in my next slide what that might look like. So how does this work in a classroom? There's different scaffolds built in, which is great, but what might this actually look like? Something else to remember about differentiation, which I've already alluded to, is that there's more than one way up the mountain. There's going to be different routes and different paths. And so I want to talk about how a learning path might look like for your different students, especially if you're teaching a mixed ability or multi-level class. And so kind of step one in talking about that is understanding that differentiation, it's impossible to have a differentiated classroom without small group learning happening. As Tomlinson says, you're attending to individual student needs or small groups of students. And Tomlinson has written entire books about how do you group students so that you can attend to the needs that they have. And she is very clear that you want to use a variety of grouping configurations in your classroom. You do not always want to put people that are at the same ability level together. You want to have what she calls flexible grouping, where sometimes you're working with people maybe from your home country, where you share a native language. And sometimes you want to be working with people that have similar hobbies than you. Maybe you put everyone that enjoys soccer together in the same group. So there's lots of ways to group students. Sometimes it's random. Sometimes it's not random, but one of the ways that you can really get to differentiated instruction is by making sure that among all the different groups that you use in your classroom, that at times you are using like ability and mixed ability groups. And so like ability groups are, as the image on the left suggests, is where you're taking a heterogeneous group with lots of different characteristics, and you are sorting by something where people have it in common. And so, for example, this could be, all of the people in blue, that group represents everyone who is reading at a level 1, needs that present tense kind of verbs. They're not ready to do past tense verbs yet. That green could represent your intermediate, and the orange could represent advanced. It doesn't have to represent that. It could represent anything that makes this group of people alike, but that's a like ability group. It could be that you have identified who in your classroom is really strong at one of the 4 domains. So, I've got some people that are really strong in speaking, so I'm going to put them into a group together, and I've got some that are still really struggling in speaking. And so however you do it, but everyone in the group has the same characteristic. That's a like ability group. A mixed ability group, the opposite, where you have a heterogeneous large group, and then you make smaller groupings of people where the ability level of the different members is different. And so if I were to take this concept and take news and levels and apply it into a classroom, it might look something like this. So I might have a group of students get together and read the level 1 article together. And I might have them listen to the SoundCloud and look at it as they're reading together. I might have a separate group who is reading that level 2 article together. And we're starting with that like ability group. So I would break my students into groups based on their level. and I would group similar levels together. And then everyone in the group is going to read that same level article. So everyone's reading level 1 if you're blue. Everyone's reading level 2 if you're green. Everyone's reading level 3 if you're orange. Then, after we've all read the article, and again, remember, we're all reading about buses. Just going back, everyone is reading about why school buses are yellow. So we're reading at the language is different, but the content is the same. And so now that we have all read about the content at our own level, then we can break into our mixed ability groups and have a discussion, an oral discussion about what we just read. And so everyone is going to be talking about yellow school buses, even though not everyone read the content at the same level. And so that's where the mixed ability groups come in to the equation. And what's so great about using that kind of structure in a classroom is that you're building in opportunities to what we call swirl. Swirl is this acronym that's very popular in TESOL, ESL education, which is taking the 4 domains, speaking, reading, listening, writing, but saying we also need, in addition to those 4, we need interaction. We need students interacting with each other. We need these student-centered classrooms with opportunities to speak authentically to each other. And so by doing that, where you have the likability groups reading the article, you're doing the reading. If you're having them listen to the SoundCloud, you're getting the listening. Then if they maybe discuss the article together in their likability groups, you've got speaking. And when they move to their mixed ability groups, they're speaking again about the content. And then ultimately, you can build to a writing assignment. And News and Levels does have some built-in questions for writing. There's actually like underneath each article, there's a question, and people can go in and like literally type in on the website the question. As a teacher, instead of sending my students back to the website, I would probably use that question, but build a writing activity based off of that. But ultimately, you could lead to writing here too. But all of that, because the students all understand the content, hopefully it's leading to some good interaction where they can talk back and forth with each other about the content. And so you're swirling. Okay. So just to make sure we're clear on this, I'm going to give you a scenario, and I'm just going to ask you, am I describing here likability groups or a mixed ability group? Okay, so here's a imaginary classroom. Mr. Williams decides to assign News and Levels as homework. Each student reads an article about bees at their own level. When they arrive in class the next day, they break into groups to discuss what they read. In one of the groups, there is one student who read the level 3 article, one student who read the level 2 article, and 2 students who read the level 1 article. What type of grouping is that? Is that a likability group that's in class there together discussing, or is that a mixed ability group? It's a mixed ability. It's a mixed ability group. And this is another way that you might think about using this resource in class is by using it as homework. I know different teachers who that's how they use it, is they use it as something for students to do outside of class, and then they discuss it when they come to class. And what I like about that is that it's an opportunity for family literacy. Many of the topics, unlike some news sites that are just, not really going to be appropriate for children, many of the topics on News and Levels are family friendly, like why school buses are yellow. That's kind of a fun thing to think about. And so by assigning it as homework, it can easily lend itself to families being able to talk about these things together. And sometimes in a family, you have the mom and dad is reading at a lot lower level than the child. And so you may even see the child being able to read the level 3 article and mom and dad reading the level 1 article, but yet the family can have a conversation about it together. So it supports the Texas AEL family content standards. Anne Marie was asking that perhaps I could show you the assessment piece about how do you know if someone's a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3. I can probably do that in just a second. But before we do that, the last thing I wanted to mention was just about the ESL content standards. And so if you were to do something similar to what I described here, where you have the likability groups reading an article, at their level, and then the mixed ability groups discussing it together, and then maybe even leading to a writing assignment. But that would be, if you had time. You're actually going to be able to be targeting quite a few ESL content standards in the process. And so one of those content standards would be 3.1D. So that content area 3, which is ESL, that sub area 1, which is listening, and the sub area standard D, which is listen to and participate in a variety of settings and situations. And so sometimes we have students that don't want to participate, or they don't feel comfortable participating. They don't feel capable of participating. And so what's nice is that by putting them into mixed ability groups where they've already read at their level, they have a comfort with the content because they have understood it at their level. And so when they go to do the listening and speaking interactive activity, they're more likely to be able to participate because they're coming in with the background knowledge that they need and the scaffolds and the supports that got them there. Also, speaking skills would be targeted here. Sub-area 3 to C. C is demonstrate an increasing range of English vocabulary appropriate for speaking in informal and formal settings. Because News and Levels has the built-in vocabulary there, and it increases in difficulty from level 1 to level 3. And so this speaking standard is targeted because we see literally as you progress through each article, the increasing range of vocabulary. When you go to do that interactive piece, you could even have as a requirement to use at least 1 or 2 of your new vocabulary words as you're talking to each other. And then lastly, obviously, because this is ultimately a reading thing, purpose is to read news articles, then we're going to target sub-area 3.3E, the reading one, which is acquire vocabulary and grammar knowledge progressively according to student proficiency to build strong mastery of the English language. And that really, more than anything, that is what News and Levels is doing, is it is helping to progressively help them to learn vocabulary and grammar. It's going from those present tense verbs to the past tense verbs to the complex past and present, according to student proficiency, which is the leveled piece of it. So definitely the standard is being targeted. So as we're swirling, even in our standards, we were able to get speaking and listening and reading. Now, I didn't include a writing standard here just because you could, for sure. You could absolutely do a writing activity with it, but I just didn't, in my scenario, didn't highlight that. But it would absolutely be possible to build on this to create writing as well. If you'll allow me, I'm going to switch back over. I was just on my Slovakia has a new president, level 1. They try to make it real easy so that way you can find the testing pretty, it's in lots of different places. But when I scroll down and I go here, it says how to improve your English with News and Levels. And I think something to know about this website is that a lot of students use it independently. These are global, international students around the world learning English who stumble upon this site, and they're using it in their own independent studies as English learners. So, for example, here, it's really talking directly to the student as opposed to talking to the teacher, but we can still utilize it as teachers. But it's saying, how do you improve your English? Well, you test. And so when you click on test languages, a new tab is going to show up, and it's going to ask the student just to mark the words that they know very well. So this isn't something super difficult. It's just the student goes through and says, I do know that one. I do know that one. I know that one. I know very. I know cold. Gets over here. Don't know scratch. Don't know slice. And they're just clicking, what do they know? What do they not know? And then there's a step 2 because the vocabulary is getting progressively more difficult. There are many, many researchers out there that study the acquisition of vocabulary of English learners. And so it is kind of a well-documented thing, which words are acquired at what point in the English journey. And so that's really what this is targeting. Like daughter, for example, that's a difficult one. So they click the ones that they know, and then they get their results. And so based off of me clicking those 3 words, they're estimating that I maybe know 70 words in English. And so it's saying if you know between 1 and 1,000, you're basically a beginner. And so you're going to be doing level 1. 1,000 to 2,000 is kind of you're in between a beginner and intermediate. So you may want to read level 1 to help you be able to read level 2. Level 2 is going to be a little stretch. 2,000 to 3,000 is that level 2, and then the kind of in between is 3 to 4,000 and 4 to 5,000. So the idea here is that about 5,000 words knowledge of 5,000 vocabulary words is roughly an advanced learner. Now, as a linguist, I feel like I have to qualify that and say what counts as a word is very controversial, but that's how this website is approaching it. So they just mark what words they know, and that tells what level they're at. And then since we just have a little bit of extra time, just so you can see, I want you to see, so I'm in level 1 about that Slovakia has a new president. I just click on level 2 and it's going to switch over, and just notice the change. So I'm going to go back to level 1 real quick. Slovakia has a new president. Peter Pellegrini wins the election. That's how it starts. When I go to level 2, Peter Pellegrini became Slovakia's new president, which supported Robert Fico's ruling party. And so you can see the immediate increase in complexity between level 1 and level 2. You've got this verb became instead of is, and you've got a complex sentence structure, which supported, whereas the previous one was just simple sentences without any additional phrases or clauses. When I go down here to the bottom, I can click the sound cloud so you can hear what that will sound like if you're reading the level 2.
Peter Pellegrini became Slovakia's new president, which supported Robert Fico's ruling party. Fico's party is skeptical towards the EU.
And notice you've got the word skeptical here. They're saying they're probably not going to know that one. And so down at the bottom, you're going to see difficult words defined. What is a skeptic? It's when you doubt that something is true or good or so on. And so those of you that are teaching ABE instead of ESL, this is still a great resource for anyone that is trying to increase their academic vocabulary, because there's lots of good academic vocabulary in there. Well, I think that's what I wanted to show you today. If you are interested in watching the first iteration of this, where we just went over news and levels, that'll be in the PD portal as well as this one. And we'd love for you to fill out the feedback form. And I think that's it.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.